The more that I thought about it, the more that the Bournemouth performance looks impressive for Liverpool. And I think a lot of people actually have really mixed opinions. And I wanted to go through those contrasting opinions and actually how both can be true in the same game. First of all, I just want to talk about tactics for Liverpool and how well Arne Slot set up against Bournemouth. Iraola has been a fantastic manager this season, especially for undermining the opposition and finding the best way to take them apart or basically just frustrate them. And there were a couple of times where I thought, you know what, like these guys, similar to when we played them before, I thought, wow, these guys actually, they've acknowledged a lot of our tactics and they're trying to counter a lot of those, even if those things aren't always successful. But what they did, which was slightly different in this game, was Iraola tried to match us up. And he tried to match us up basically shape for shape, the shape that we normally play. Now, it basically meant that in the side, we actually went slightly more defensive and we had more like a 4-1-4-1 than the 4-4-2 that we normally have, or the 4-2-4 that we actually normally have, or depending on whether you're in possession or not, right? We basically changed shape, and it changed a lot of the roles that we needed to have the players play, should we say. So, I don't think it's all that revolutionary to put Trent in the middle of midfield and create an overload. I don't think it's all that revolutionary that Diaz is playing a false nine. But I do think that the way that our centre-backs played and the way that we played the ball out, but specifically Allison, when he went along so much more, I was looking at his balls after the game, so to speak, and we played so many more long balls, is what I need to say. I shouldn't have said it like that, and sorry, guys. But the point was that we basically took out a lot of their midfield and did a lot of bypassing. And I've noticed this a lot more in recent games. I kind of noted it as well. There are still elements of this Klopp side that we can still exploit, right? There are still moments where you go, wow, like we went long and, we used to go long a lot more. And Arne Slot acknowledges that is a part of Liverpool's game, which is still really strong. But it's not quite as controlling, which is what I thought brought a lot of people into thinking that it was a little bit more frenetic for more of the game than it actually was. And I think Liverpool were actually very comfortable doing that. Slot essentially backed his players. Slot essentially backed his guys and said, we're going to play long balls here, and actually we're going to win those balls. And I think that's really important. Not only that, but he then backed us to do the tactics after that as well. And, when you've been playing something consistent, when you begin to know each other just a little bit better in the shapes and where people really are, it really works. But again, it's when things then change, what then happens. And I think it's why people are more critical of people like Szoboszlai. They're more critical of the midfield and the passing there. They think that someone like Gravenberch, who's seen as a more defensively minded player, but is also a great ball carrier, is seen as praised in this game because we were less likely to play to Szoboszlai's strengths or to McAllister's strengths in this game, and much more likely to play to Gravenberch's strengths. And like I said yesterday, like he covered all the way along that back line, basically from Van Dijk all the way over to Trent, and it worked really nicely. Not only that, but his carries are fantastic. I still love the little ball thing, like basically the no-touch step over that he does, which is just lovely. It's like a little dip and go. There will be a player in the end that works that out, or there'll be a player that harries him enough or is hurried enough to get him out of that. But broadly, it works in the Premier League, and he's also big enough and kind of long enough to make it work almost every time, frankly. And when players do put their feet in, he tends to get fouled, so it works quite nicely for us. A real issue for us right now is Trent. He's a fantastic player when he's on and when he's switched on, but the inconsistency of him playing, the injuries, which is, I think, one thing that Liverpool are relatively concerned about when it comes to him signing another contract is, if we are going to sign someone to a very high contract, such as Van Dijk or such as Salah, the reason we give them that is because they're playing virtually every game, which is virtually true of Van Dijk and Salah, right? Unless there's like a League Cup game or something like that. And even then, they'll play that against Spurs back at Anfield. Trent won't, because Trent is probably out for Thursday. And the frustration when that happens, I think, around Liverpool is understandable. It's also obviously frustrating for Trent as well, but it's a real reason why teams think, well, are we going to sign this guy on something super high? Are we going to give him the supermax, so to speak? And very often that has made Liverpool question how long they can rely on Trent in this position or in this current state for. And I think that's fair enough. I don't mind rotating Bradley in, but it's a very different team when Bradley plays in it, and it's a very different ball movement. The opposition don't fear us in the same way. Trent is someone who's just exceptional at carving the game open and carving the opposition open, but also surprising oppositions with his ball. Either Salah or out to the other wing, and it gives us this latitude on the pitch. That's what Robertson and Trent have given us for years, this latitude that we need out on the field, which just undermines the opposition's press sometimes. And, if we're going to go long, it's great, get it out to Trent. We didn't do that so much yesterday. We did that more through Allison. But that's the point here. And I think, it doesn't immediately make me feel anything. Trent will be here till the end of the season. But it does make me feel hesitant to, again, do something where it's like, right, well, we've got to sign him up. We've got to get him. Yeah, he's a brilliant player. And when he's on, then he's amazing. But there is a lot of criticism of Trent this season. And I don't know if it's because particularly people feel like he's 1 foot one foot in, 1 foot out, which he probably is and isn't in that sense. Like when you've got a contract you haven't signed, or there is no signed contract, of course you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out. That's perfectly understandable. But where'd you go after that? And I think that the commentary has been had on that. Whatever opinion is that I expressed to you at this point probably won't change whatever it is that you think Trent is going to do. My logic is still that he stays, by the way. But I'd be interested to know what you guys think in the comments below. Allison really was excellent yesterday. To me, he still looks a little stiff. To me, he looked a little bit uncomfortable in his movement sometimes, and I think that's fair enough. He's still recovering. But some of the saves he pulled off I thought were exceptional. I wasn't like, blown. There were no all-timer saves in there, but I thought there were some really great solid Premier League saves that I think some of the goalkeepers probably have them go by them, or they just, it makes for an awkward situation. I think for most of the time he's great at palming the ball or keeping it or knocking it away into a very safe area for Liverpool. And Liverpool in general are very good at working out where to put the ball to then be able to get it down the other end of the field. It's either in Allison's hands or, like you saw yesterday, there was that mistake from Trent where the ball goes up in the air. Generally, what he's trying to do is head it so that one of the Liverpool players can claim it and then get it going down the field. Generally, that works, but it didn't yesterday, and it almost cost us, frankly. The other thing I really wanted to note, which I think is a real weird point of debate, is it was a penalty. There is this one angle that Arsenal fans seem to be showing. Weirdly, I don't know why Arsenal fans in particular are showing it, but they are Arsenal fans that are showing it. Saying, oh, he's tripped himself there. Well, blatantly, you wouldn't trip yourself if you're through at that angle. I get that he's gone across his man and his man has then tripped him. But why not? The other angle clearly shows that either this part or this part of the leg of the opposition collides with his own boot and causes him to kick. Basically, it causes to push inside his leg to push inside of its stride and for then it to strike the other leg and down he goes. For me, it's a classic penalty. For me, it's a really smart move from a striker. I don't understand why other people can't just acknowledge that. And yeah, I guess it plays into this narrative of, oh, the PGMOL are against us. Well, I would be annoyed if I was someone and I had people making things up about me, especially if I've made plenty of mistakes already. Criticize the things that are actually real. Don't just make things up. I find it weird. There were plenty of other points in the game where you think, oh, is this ref really giving Bournemouth the fair crack of the whip here? But not that. That was blatantly a penalty. Having said that, Bournemouth I actually thought were really impressive. I think Bournemouth's intensity, Bournemouth's reading of the game, Areola's opposition to what it was that we were trying to achieve was fantastic. But what I really wanted to acknowledge, and I think what's been acknowledged broadly in the media this week, is this is a team that Richard Hughes essentially built. And I wanted to talk a bit about how Liverpool's team building probably is going to change under Hughes and why he was brought in by someone like Edwards, but also why he was brought in conjunction with someone like Slot. Let's talk about Edwards. First of all, Edwards has pretty much built that side that Bournemouth now have. The Semenyos, all these different incredible players who now line up for Bournemouth and put them in a much better position than we traditionally would have thought Bournemouth would be. That's then paired with a great manager. That's paired with a manager who's really good at working out what a player's strength is and then playing to it and then allowing them that instinctive moment to be able to capitalise and strike. And they almost did that yesterday. There were times where, as I said on the Anfield Wrap, we were riding our luck. I think that's fair enough. Yes, Liverpool have rode their luck a little bit this season, but I think broadly, the correlation, the idea that we've rode our luck for this long doesn't really scan for me. And I thought Bournemouth were good, but I also think very often, like the missed open goal, the stanchion that he hit, or I think he hit the bar. Those are moments where there are potential turning points, but they're both misses, bro. Like there were a season where we had 12 shots hit the bar, and it was like, well, if any of those had gone in, all of them were misses. And it's partly the pressure that Liverpool put you under. It's partly the spaces that they make you shoot from. It's partly the shape that they make you play in. These are all subtle changes where it influences where the player's shot goes. It influences how the player plays. If you've got Konate coming over at you who's huge, you're thinking, I've got about that much of the goal to put this ball that's about that big in. that is pressure. That's how you're meant. That's part of the, that's part of the mental side of the game, is I guess what I'm saying. Part of being an elite Premier League player is that you do put it away, you do deliver in that moment. Salah delivered in that moment. And I think that's part of the point here is it's not about finding players who are all about delivering in the moment immediately, but it is about, Bournemouth have built this team to be tactically very sound, but they need a coach, again, probably like Areola, who's going to take them even further than that. He's building towards that. That doesn't just happen overnight. But Hughes has built this, and he shopped in very unusual places to do it. Semenyo was at Bristol City when he came there. Essentially, he was loaned out from Sunderland to Sunderland and a couple of other teams before that. So he'd had his time climbing the league. But it's not like Liverpool very often can go shop in that part of town and make those players take the big step up to where they are now. Very often you need this bridging team to be able to, first of all, take that risk. Although, if we spent a summer, the problem would be if we spent a summer spending, say we bought, similar to Chelsea almost, but at a lower cost, 20 players, say we want to spend 300 million. We bought 20 players at 15 million each, right? So, that's a whole new squad, basically. I'm being ridiculous for the sake of it. But then we knew that we're only going to keep 3 of them. So many of those players aren't going to sign knowing, oh, well, if I don't make it here, I'm on to my next one. If I don't make it here, where am I going next? We cannot shop in that way because that's the way that teams slightly lower down. We also, slightly lower down the table, have to take that risk so that then they can sell on to a team like Liverpool. But also that's not... Years ago, it made sense during the... It certainly still makes sense business-wise, but it doesn't always make sense to buy players at low cost and sell them at high cost and be that team that are always going up and down. It led to constant up and downing of people like Dortmund. It leads to constant up and downing of people like Brighton, Bournemouth, all these sides. And Liverpool need the consistency, so we can't quite shop at that level. But what it does mean is that his reading of the game, his reading of that level upwards is fantastic. He can identify players at that level. He's also identified elite players or players who have gone on to be elite. Now, what that then means is that in working in conjunction with someone like Slot, he's got this production line essentially of people coming through, give them to Slot, who's very good at working with cheaper and less expensive players than the millions and millions and millions that have been spent elsewhere, and then developing those people, coaching those people into the shape that they want them to be. Similar to what Manchester United are doing now, where it's like, hey, we're going to buy Dorgu, we're going to buy X or Y. All these pieces fit together to make a long-term production line which develops talent. Granted, even now for a high price of about 30 million or 25 million there, and the same for a lot of Bournemouth players, Brighton players. But it develops them into these superstars. And, Klopp, I think, said it himself. He spoke about this idea of we could go out there and spend a whole bunch of money on all of this squad, but that's not necessarily the Liverpool way. We've spent on plenty of players, but not every player. And I think a lot more teams are feeling that way now, that they want to make it more sustainable because of PSR system. They want to make it all these more long-term goals work out rather than just these short-term wins, because they realize that PSR, financial fair play, even just the sustainability of the sport, because the closer you get to the unsustainability, the harder it gets for it to be sustainable. For the sustainability of the sport, they have to move in this direction. Liverpool have been moving in that direction for quite some time, and I think we've been ahead of the curve in that sense. But now other people are beginning to catch up. We're all shopping in similar markets. And frankly, it's going to be down to people like Hughes to identify unearthed or almost unearthed players that then we move on to this next stage. It's promising from what he's done at Bournemouth, put it that way. And that's the core of that point there. It also makes me slightly excited for the summer when you think about the rebuild that we've got on there and essentially what is, I think it's a big summer for us and the reinforcements we're bringing in. There will be some big changes in the summer. I think a lot of people are still like, I did that clip on Sky Sports where I basically said, I think a lot of people aren't expecting it, that we are going to have some big changes and there will be some almost shock. I guess it's not surgery, but rotations within the team, not because we don't like the players, not because they're not quality players, but just because some of them are going to be getting a little bit older. We're going to need to bring in some new bodies. Some people want to move on to the next thing. It's not unreasonable to say our fullbacks move on, any of these things. But what was weird was in the comments of that, a load of people were then going, nah, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know. nah, this is never going to happen. It's like, well, yeah, by definition, then, of course, it's going to be a shock to you if this stuff doesn't happen or this stuff does happen because you're denying what I'm saying. Come back when it does, and then we'll talk. But until then, you know. I'd love to know what you guys really appreciated about the game yesterday. I loved Gravenberch's performance. A lot of comments on the video about the different types of analysis. I just want to go through some of these, bring up my studio. Got to change because I also do some Manchester United and Arsenal videos over on my main channel right now. Not to keep banging that drum, but Diaz didn't contribute with a goal, but apparently had a good game. If that had been Núñez, Diaz is a very different contribution to Núñez. Núñez makes some great runs, but Diaz isn't just about those runs. Diaz is also about the ball. He's also about the control. He's also about the carrying. I think overall he's a slightly more suited player to what Slot wants him to do. It's not that Núñez is a bad player. No one's saying he's a bad player, but I think a couple of people now are getting a bit obsessed with conflating the negative things that are said about Núñez with other players. And I don't get why. I don't quite get where the productivity comes from that. Let's identify and essentially isolate that problem and then talk about it. It's not that Diaz didn't have a classic game, he didn't have his best game ever, but he had a decent game. And I think if he's making space, if he's doing those runs, I get it, you want a great striker, you want someone who can probably do both. But at the moment we don't have that. And frankly, I'd rather have Diaz in that position, able to rotate with a Gakpo or what he does with Szoboszlai, because I understand that system and I understand the outcome of that. We changed that against the likes of Brentford and it worked because of the one tactic that we could do. It's not going to work against every team because we're not going to be able to get every team that deep and manipulate their players in such a way. So fair enough, you know? I don't think Diaz had his best game. I'd like to pay tribute to how Bournemouth were making Allison the man of the match. Their work rate is impressive. We were just 3% better than them. I'll break that down. We weren't 3% better overall. Divide the game into thirds. We were 1% better in defence, 1% better in midfield, and 1% better up front. Really nice framing there, by the way. By such small margins, did we outplay them? By such small margins, did we outplay them? Lovely bit of English. I thought this would be the toughest game we played. I was right. Bit self-congratulating, but fair enough. Bournemouth, to me, deserve to be sitting just behind us in the league. I don't think they've been consistent enough to do that, but fair enough. I still think people paying tribute to Bournemouth's performances is good. Liverpool were very lucky against Bournemouth. Defending needs to improve. I agree. I do think defending needs to improve, but I broke that down earlier, guys. It is 2 or 3 times Bournemouth hit the bar or post. That could have been a Bournemouth win. Yeah, it wasn't, though, was it? That's kind of the point in these kind of games. You go back and look at the stats and you go, our XG was 2.66 after the game. It's probably higher now. Their XG was 1, just below 1, actually. So that's also because we have a penalty. But whatever it was, take the penalty off and it's still higher. Virgil van Dijk and Salah have been brilliant. Trent has been lazy, looks disinterested and really arrogant this season. I'm not quite sure it's that far. I think those are quite extreme terms to put on Trent. But I understand where you're coming from. I get the frustration, essentially. 10 more wins should be enough, says someone in the comments. I'm going to finish the video on this, guys. Are we talking about this here? Are we actually talking about this now? I get that it's nice to hype ourselves. Can we enjoy this moment, which is kind of pre that? This moment where we just sit and go, let's just enjoy the football. Let's just enjoy the feeling of cruising. That's what I love. The feeling of cruising. And the feeling of this team. Because I don't think this team won't be there next season. This team won't be in the same shape. There'll be 1 or 2 big pieces gone. Appreciate Allison while we have him. Appreciate Salah while we have him. Appreciate Van Dijk and Trent while he's fit. I'm just pre that a little bit because I want to see how people like Arsenal do today, guys. I want to see how people like Arsenal do. A lot of people saying that was messy. Yeah. Someone else saying I would bring back Kevin Geller. Honestly, the staves that Allison made should be expected, while kudos to an excellent Bournemouth. Yeah, a lot of people being a bit down. I think if I'd have been that down in the video, I would have probably gotten a lot of pelters. I thought I was a bit more positive. I thought we controlled the game more than people gave us credit for. And when I say control, like I said yesterday, I don't think we controlled it in the way that we normally control things. We were much more open to the way that Bournemouth were playing, tried to counter that. They tried to bait us a few times. We didn't really take it. We made our numbers work in the right parts of the midfield because people like Slot anticipate what it is that people like Iraola are going to do, and he anticipated it perfectly. And then the tweaks he made played us even more into the game and just sat us that little bit more comfortably until Iraola made that change. There was that little period where things didn't go so well for us, and you could see them hitting the bar and those kind of things, even though that was also for a sustained period over the game, but they only created little chances as they went. And then he adjusted things again, bringing people like Curtis on, allowing us a little bit more control in that area of the field. These subtle changes make big differences. And I think a lot of people are looking for like a Roy of the Rovers style performance from Liverpool sometimes to kind of go, oh, like, that's the one. It's Gerrard again. It's Trent again. And Salah was obviously great yesterday, but I thought outside of the goals that he contributed, his gravity was there, but it wasn't like a classic Salah game. That's kind of my point there. I think these are all tiny margins, which is probably why I relate to that 1%, 1%, 1% more than I relate to the, you had a terrible game, you had a good game. I don't think Allison will be here next season, frankly, guys. I think it'll be Mamardashvili in goal. I think that's partly down to his distribution and the way that we want him to, way we want to play. But I also just think it's down to freshening things up. So, Allison is probably the best goalkeeper on the planet right now, or is labelled as such, and he's been given the opportunity to play in that way. Let's see what happens with Mamardashvili. I'll be interested to see. If we re-sign Allison, you know it's because we think his stats outweigh Mamardashvili's. And if we bring in Mamardashvili, it's because Allison is leaving, and I think Kelleher goes too, and Jarosz becomes number 2 at Liverpool. That's a massive change for us. That's like leadership-wise, dynamic-wise, all these different elements. That's a huge difference. I look forward to hearing what you guys think in the comments below. There's Discord down there. There is also a Patreon. If you want to contribute, maybe even buy me a coffee, something like that. It's very little every month, and I really appreciate what you guys put forward for it. Should I do membership on this channel? Let me know in the comments below. If I should do membership, let me know. I will chat to you guys in a little while. Much love. Bye.